So, as I promised, that I was just wrapping up on the convention question, and it led me to, the next question, which is, what is KEG, and why are you so obsessed with it right now? So, I have been doing nothing but spending all my mornings uh, writing and developing and designing KEG, which stands for the Knowledge Exchange Graph. You can sometimes, I used to say grid for the G, but um, KEG, if those have been following me for a while, I don't think I've ever made a video on this, so I'll just do it really quickly. Since 2016, I've been, trying to follow my own mantra of don't get mad, get busy. And one of the things that makes me the maddest is how bad the internet is, how bad the World Wide Web was. In fact, how bad HTML was, even from the beginning. SGML was broken and HTML was built on it. And it's just a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. If you see me, doing any kind of terminal browsing, you'll see me complain about JavaScript dependency and the unnecessary images and the complete focus on applications and Flash and the removal entirely of the original purpose of the World Wide Web, which was to facilitate communication between CERN scientists and save on emails and stuff like that. And eventually, when they added pictures, everybody thought it was a great thing. But the downfall of the internet or the World Wide Web, in my particular opinion, happened. And this isn't just an old guy complaining. I'm going to make my case here. It happened as soon as, and I think it was Mark Andreas, and I don't know for sure, but it happened as soon as they took control of knowledge consumption, the documents, away from the user or the reader, and they gave it to the creators, to the writers, to the web authors, to the webmasters. And that happened in about 98, 99. And I think you can trace the downfall of the World Wide Web to that moment. At that time, at least as a documentation exchange and knowledge exchange medium, right? Now, we still get all of our knowledge off the World Wide Webs, off the interwebs, but just, I don't have to cite all of the specific examples of why the web is totally broken today. Just watch the documentary on Cambridge Analytica to see how the interwebs has been used to completely control public opinion, to topple governments, to create riots, to pump up the culture wars in America. All of this stuff fundamentally is tied to the decline of the World Wide Web because of all of the things that they let slide in the 90s and the 80s. And this just makes me sound like an old guy, get off my lawn, but I don't care. Here's what happened. Back in and I'll tell you how this relates to KEG in a minute. Back in like 98, 97, so whenever it was. Back then, and if you go back long enough, far enough, you can go back and find a link to it. I don't really want to find it right now. But you can go find the original World Wide Web. And the original World Wide Web, the web browser, had one background. It had standard font, had a standard text for that font and color. And the only thing that you could change about it, well, first of all, as an author, you couldn't change anything. The whole point was you were going to present these markdown documents, and you were going to stick with, hey, here's the information, and maybe there's a picture here, but that's it. And the control over the look and the feel of the content remained entirely with the consumer, which in my opinion is how it should be. And I'll cite Amazon Kindle for this. Because Amazon Kindle, to this day, the reason that people buy Kindles, and they do it all the time, is they can turn the font size up. Then when they're reading their novel, they can consume the content at the pace that they want. They can decide which pages. And this is also going downhill because of PDFs and some documents which have more involved graphical content. And I'm not against that. And what's the web design book? HTML web design comes to mind, right? There's definitely a need for graphics in certain publications, and I'm not anti-graphics. I'm just saying that in terms of document exchange, that the only vestige of this that remains is, things like the Kindle Reader and all the other readers that came from that, which give the power to the user to decide how they're going to read the content. And you still, to this day, you can't even, most websites, there's kind of a resurgence about this, by the way. So there's some interesting, fun stuff to talk about here historically. So we'll go back to the 90s really quick. I promise I'll bring us back up to 2023 pretty quickly. But back in the 90s or so, the user lost control of their experience for data consumption on the web. And that started with the blink tag, which, by the way, was just a joke. You know that, right? The blink tag was a joke. And then JavaScript came, and then CSS came, and Netscape, and they got really powerful, and there was a huge browser war going on. So the people that broke the rules got to decide what to do. And so Netscape kept breaking all the rules. They didn't go with any of the standards. They started adding all of these formatting tags that had no business being in HTML, and they totally destroyed HTML. I mean, it just completely obliterated it. So much so that when HTML5 eventually had to come out, they had to roll back all of these horrible ideas of formatting. They created things like the center tag and the marquee tag, which is still a valid tag. They just completely obliterated the entire idea of Markdown, which was supposed to be what Tim Berners-Lee tried to bring back with the semantic web, which meant, hey, this content here is a paragraph, this content is important, emphasis as opposed to bold, right? And so it wasn't about presentation, it was about, the semantics of the content. Specifically, is this more important than this other thing over here? And that never, it was the end of the web as we know it. And from that moment on, and then you fast forward and you got CSS, right? And CSS says, oh, hey, look, and they sold it to everybody as a big old flexibility thing. It's like, well, you can actually, plug in a different style sheet and you can see it entirely differently. And we can let the users have control of the style sheets. And no, that never happened. I mean, look at CSS now. You can make X-Wings fly across the screen with CSS now. Like 3D X-Wings can fly across the screen with CSS. You think that I can swap out another CSS for that? No. The people... The original intent of the web has been obliterated. Flash came out because that's what people wanted, and then Steve Jobs didn't want it, so he killed it, even though he said he was for web standards. The Safari is the last thing to adopt progressive web apps as a web standard. Total hypocrite. And then what happened? And now we get HTML5. And HTML5 was a hearkening back. They injected life back into the B tag and to the I tag. I means that it, would have been represented as in italics in a novel or something, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, they still can't even decide. So HTML is a disaster. HTML5 is a total disaster. Open any web page today, and yeah, there's a bunch of blah, blah, blah about how bad div soup is, but nobody cares. Do you think Disney cares? Disney is the first company I've ever heard of to turn their entire website into a WebAssembly application in Rust. And if you think that that's the end of it, no, buckle up, because it's going to get worse than Flash over the next 5 years. Because the web has become nothing more than a vehicle for applications delivery. That's it. It's no longer a basis. In fact, if you want to really laugh and cry, go subscribe to the JavaScript sites in search, and it's just clusterfuck after clusterfuck after ruined site after ruined site. All of these companies complaining because somebody came in and put React all over their blog and documentation site, and now none of it's being indexed by Google. And so they had to create all of these statically generated and server-side generated and all of these crazy hydration and all of this shit. They had to do all of this stuff to just try to get it back to where it was. And in the middle of all of this, along comes this company that was founded by somebody who used to be at Twitter, Medium, for medium-sized Twitter posts. And what does Medium decide to do? This is absolutely fascinating to me. What does Medium do? What is their entire value proposition? Anybody? Oh, visual impairment. Yeah, they had to add ARIA tags, all kinds of stuff, right? So Medium comes along, and what do? They say, yeah, they host articles, but has anybody ever published an article for Medium? It's absolutely fascinating to me, and I've written a blog about this myself. I'm not on Medium anymore because of their whole bait and switch crap. Like everybody does it. Yeah. Okay. Well, they don't let you read more than 5 articles, which is the reason I got off of them. But if you've ever actually written for Medium, I find this so fascinating. So it took a startup, and they actually got venture capital for this. Medium got venture capital to build a service which forces the same original requirements and constraints of the web when it was first founded on everybody. It just makes me laugh. They got billions of dollars. They got billions of dollars to make a company that says, oh, we're just about reading, the reading experience. We're just about documents. That's all we are. In fact, if you're going to participate in Medium, this is what you get. You can come and use the web interface to author your documents, but you only get one level of list. You can't do list indentation. No. And if you're going to put a picture, it's got to be right in the middle. You got to put a picture right in the middle, and it's got to only appear right there. And you have to have a white background. No, you cannot let anybody change the background. The font, no, you have to use the medium font. Everybody gets the medium font. Everybody gets the same way of link. Oh, there's a link. Guess what? If you're reading it on Medium, everybody knows where the links are because they all look the same. They took away functionality from the web. They went back to pre-HTML5. And even at the dawn of HTML, they didn't even allow like some of the stuff that was even in the original HTML. They injected all of these constraints on everybody, and they asked for money. They got millions of dollars of seed capital, and then they turned around and said, hey, by the way, if you want to keep blogging just like everybody used to do in the original web, and you want to produce all this stuff, sorry, you're going to have to pay. You're going to have to pay for us to tell you that you can't use multiple levels of list indentation, and that all of your links have to look the same. And maybe we'll let you post a picture someday. We still don't support SVG. Actually, they finally came around with that. But no, because SVG is dangerous. But you got to have these raster images. And they don't care. They're laughing all the way to the bank. So, I submit that all of this is evidence of just the massive fail that is the World Wide Web today. The World Wide Web, I think SVG eventually finally got supported, yeah, which is XML, right? And XML came along in there somewhere. We won't even talk about DHTML and that whole thing that completely failed. I mean, the web has been one failure after another failure after another failure. And when the standards body got a hold of it, they failed too because they didn't move fast enough. So the W3 working group comes along and says, okay, we're at least going to push something through. So they pushed it through. And now they're all kumbayaing with the W3 working group is now officially under the W3 management again. So W3 is like, well, yeah, we took forever to do anything. So I guess finally we'll do something. I mean, the entire thing has been a disaster. The fact that our whole world gets all of its data from this massive clusterfuck, it just blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind, and to the point where I either have to laugh or cry or make something new. And this leads me up to the next thing. So one last little story. Once upon a time, I laughed at the guy. I was Nike's internet webmaster, so that's what I did was the web. I believed in knowledge exchange and all that stuff. So. And then I got headhunted into a company called Teleport, where I was their back-end, engineer, I guess. Wrote CGI guy, they called it back then. And then, so I spent a lot of time like writing gateways for email exchange and virtual servers and things. And I'll never forget that my immediate boss, Lynn, came in and she told me about this fight that she just had. Not a fight, but kind of a debate with the CEO about whether Gopher was going to win over the web. And a lot of people won't remember this, but if you go back to 95, 96, right after Eudora, we were all, buzzing about using email. There were two competing ways to use the internet. And I was in college when this happened. A lot of people, they weren't born, so they won't remember this, but it's kind of fun. So during that time, Gopher came out, and there was a thing called Archie, and Archie was, very much pre-Google, but that was a way to search all of the Gopher sites out there. And Gopher was modeled after directories. And all it was a bunch of directories, and you could have an index on top of it that would kind of show you what was in the directory. In fact, HTML on the web kind of came about from that index file that went with your Gopher directory, kind of expanded in its purpose, and it became a way to list all the stuff in there. I don't know if how many of you remember this, but the web, FTP, used to be able to click and go to a file transfer site, which was just directories, of course. But they also allowed an index file. And that index file was the file that would give you a little bit of information at the top of the page, and the browser would just show you this, the directories, the little graphic icons. You click on them, pixelated icons, and you go into the FTP directories, and then each directory could have this index file that would give you a little blurb about that directory, and that was it. And so for a very long time, and Gopher did the same thing. So for a very long time, index of, and you still can do it. You absolutely can still do it with FTP. Yeah. And so what they would do is they would put an index of inside of, and so a lot of people don't know, but this is where index.html came from. That's why it's called index. It was supposed to be an index or sort of a summary of all of the stuff inside of that directory. And that could include files and other directories of files. And so this idea of directories and folders, whatever you want to call them, was the first thing that the internet ever saw for sharing knowledge and files as well as documents. Now, when the web came out, when the first time HTML came out, it was 100% document focused, and that's why people adopted it. They didn't like this idea of navigating. I mean, they'd already been bored to death by navigating directory file trees, on their, whether it be on their, DOS command prompt or their really primitive, graphic application interfaces. And yeah. and so people were done with directories. They weren't sexy. They worked, but they weren't sexy. Nobody wanted to just navigate through a bunch of, hierarchical file trees anymore. That had been done already. Everybody knew that. And they're like, why do we want that? So along comes the very, very sexy HTML. And the reason it was sexy is because it said, hey, there's no directory here. We're going to use hypertext. Remember that index.html? Now we're going to make it so that you just see one file. And if there's anything underneath this, we'll link to it. And so you can click on the link, and that will take you into that other directory. And if you want to, it's just a directory listing, just like before. Or you can, and it still does that, by the way, or you can, it'll show you the other directory. And then that index will show you the other stuff. Gopher is very much a thing. Yeah. And that was the way of the world for a very long time. And web pages were not really structured data at all. Web pages. So the idea originally of index.html was you would have this nice, consumable, readable thing. And when you got to the part that you cared about, you could click on a link and you could open up that thing. And that thing could contain another, really happy description if you want to. But most of the time back then, it was actually just another directory. So it was just a layer of readability that was added to an otherwise very plain Jane, directory structure. I mean, that was the original intent, was to have readable documentation and make it easier for a human to navigate these really boring directory trees. And the thing I find absolutely comical in its irony is how far that original intent of the web has come. Do you think people making web pages today care at all about the underlying content organization? They don't. They really don't care. And so they don't. And then you got an entire very loud, very powerful faction of people that people are mentioning here that just want the web to be JavaScript. Now, I'm going to propose something of an armistice here between the people who want the document web back and the people who are promoting the web as a delivery platform for applications. And what I would suggest, and I've written about this actually, is that the web has become primarily three things. I think it could be four, but primarily three things. The web has become a place for document information exchange, an indexed, searchable place to get knowledge, and that includes places like Reddit and all those main sites and Google and all of the sites that get indexed by those things. Right? That is the original intent of the World Wide Web, and I think that it still remains a significant thing. Now, I also happen to believe that particular part of the internet of the World Wide Web is got a massive cancerous filled body, with tumors everywhere. I don't think that you can use the World Wide Web as a reliable means of communication for lots of reasons, including the management of SEO by profiteering companies and those with agendas who have no interest in what you actually want. That's probably the most important. And when they could have made it, they could have given you the entire power. They could have designed a system where all of the users of the internet can set their own search criteria and manage them individually, but they didn't because they can't make any money at it. So they completely, got rid of that. And the second form of the web is the one that's getting all the attention right now, and that is the applications web. And that's what's going to give us WebAssembly. That's what gives us, we can play full 3D games in web browsers now. So the web browser is the new desktop. Some have even dared say, like Google's Chrome, that the web browser is the new operating system. This is so tragic and horrible, but that needed to happen. We needed to have a reasonably reliable sandbox way to deliver applications, because the alternative is 2 or 3 app stores where people take 60%, and that's also not okay. So having an application delivery platform that's safe and sandboxed, I'm all for it. I think it needs to happen. I want to use it. I regularly, and then the third one is the broadcast web or the streaming web. People don't realize this, but Netflix is web technology. Twitch, you're watching web technology right now. YouTube. So publishing and broadcasting, these have nothing to do with documents. I mean, read the show notes down at the bottom is not a document. That's like an afterthought to the main content, which is streaming and broadcasting and video and rich media and whatever you want to call it. But that is one part of the web. It's a very real, very, very, very important part of the web. Twitch is, of course, the front and center and all of that. And I am an avid proponent of that part of the web. And I, regularly, promote that part of the web. So I am not against that at all. I think that needs to be there. I think we need all three. I think the one that has suffered the most in all of this, and Tim Berners-Lee actually came out and tried to, say this, is the document web, the simple exchange of written information and dialogue in an uncontrolled, user has the power sort of way. This simple written expression of oneself, and you have to go to a blog app to do it. And that's wrong. To me, that's just wrong. You shouldn't have to have an app to publish what you have to say, no matter what. And the reason that HTML was so broken is because it immediately required an engineer, hey, let me make that better for you. And the reason that John Gruber and Aaron Swartz invented Markdown was because it was created for writers. If the World Wide Web had been envisioned by writers and creatives instead of scientists and those who over-engineer crap and smash protons together, it would have been a much better thing, but it wasn't. And so they looked around for the other scientific standards out there, and they grabbed HTML, which was a huge mistake, and they completely doomed any content creator who was not either beholden to an app that some other engineer made, conveniently enough, who has all the power, right? And power equals money. And where was all the money and power and fighting going on in the 90s? Who controls the browser? Because if you control the browser, you control the money, you control the information, you control everything. And if the decision to make the web dependent on technology that engineers controlled, which is, by the way, the same problem with cryptocurrency, but I don't want to go there right now. That's if you don't believe me, go look at all the infighting between Bitcoin and Bitcash or Bitcoin Cash or whatever, because it was all about who controlled the technology, the gatekeeper technologies that allowed these free and open standards to be used on the internet. So even though HTML wasn't really complicated at first, it was still not something that somebody could just write. Well, Markdown always has been that. It's kind of sad because Markdown has moved away from that. In fact, that's why when I see things like JSX, which is a mixture of JavaScript and Markdown, I just want to punch somebody because it's completely against the goals and designs of Markdown in the first place. They're like, you know what? We need to create a way that someone with simple text, VI, Emacs, or the most simplest of text browsers can just write We just need somebody who can actually just write. Okay. We need people I know people love JSX. Web developers love it. Yeah. Do you think my wife would love JSX? What if I told my wife that the only way she could publish web content was to write JSX? What do you think she would say? No, thank you. I will continue to write in my book and type things out and then send them to the people that I care about. So the engineers in the world have made it so that everybody else has to go through them. We'll talk about that later. They don't know. They don't know any better. So the people who are the least technical, I mean, even Markdown is a stretch for them to learn. So we are now to the point where I can tell you what KEG is. So the knowledge exchange grid is a complete rethinking of knowledge exchange, creation, content management, and exchange that's based on the simplest possible technology. It is literally the polar opposite of the web as it started out. And it leverages the momentum of Markdown. Markdown was created because some writers wanted to produce content and they did not want to have to write HTML every day. And I don't have to, I'm gonna show you some things here and go back to shared mode here. But you know, I'm here editing a Markdown file right now. This is a Markdown file. And other than the URLs, which we all know by now, at one point, I know it's probably hard for you to believe, but at one point, nobody knew what URLs were, what they meant, and they were still very foreign. But our society has trained everybody well in that. But I mean, this is relatively easy to read, right? This is the kind of code, now I'm using VI, but this is the kind of thing that anybody with a text editor, even the simplest of text editors, could write. And I regularly write stuff that ends up on the web or in my zettelkasten or something using Markdown on paper. Would you think I would be writing HTML on paper? No. But the minimal, like, you know, changes to this and the minimal syntax of it by putting hashtag to the beginning of a header. These are all things that were invented by writers. And so KEG starts out with something called KEGmark, which is a simplification of even Markdown. And you can write Markdown on paper. It's actually a kind of nice way. I've done it quite a bit. You can write Markdown on paper and you can transfer that paper, and it's very easy to do, very easy to go back and forth. So my criteria for everything that I do is, can it be done on paper, potentially? What is the least amount of technology? Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to always do it on paper. No, but could it be? So decisions like, for example, should I use a universal unique identifier for this that has a big old, if you go to my Zet, right? My universal unique identifiers are what I call an ISO second. These are seconds in UTC, which you could actually, all you need is a watch for this. You look at your watch, you subtract the number of hours from where you're at, and you have the ISOSEC, and you can generate a unique identifier that within the context of what you're making is good enough. Do I need one of these things? Do I need a UID like this? Do I need one of those? No. And this people, I always am going off against Obsidian. This is one of those opportunities that Obsidian, this proprietary crap that claims to be good for knowledge management, has really failed on, because they chose to use pieces of technology that require dependence on a computer where they didn't need it. They didn't need to do that. And so the people coming to the designs that I have for Knowledge Exchange Grid are often taken aback by the simplicity. They're like, well, that's kind of simple. In fact, it's too simple. Engineers don't like it. They don't like it because it's too simple. They're like, okay, so you're telling me there's just like 3 kinds of nodes on the internet. I mean, there's 3 kinds of, it's basically a way to organize knowledge source, I call it. And it applies all of the lessons we've already learned from software development to knowledge management without too much over engineering. In other words, to make a text node, a node is a big fancy word. That's just like a node on a graph. And a graph is, yes, it's an engineering term. But it's the right thing to say. So a node is just one point, right? And so a text node has a readme file, a readme.md file, and you just write in very, very basic Markdown, which is even simplified from the stuff that's there. Can you use LaTeX and create academic publications? Absolutely, if you know how to do that, right? If you know how to do that and you are willing to give up, and by the way, that goes for blind people. So blind people's, the language of math, the only language of math that blind people can participate in is LaTeX or MathJax. And this is a notational language that's designed to represent very complex, mathematical symbols in a way that can be streamed in just, characters. And because of that, the entire blind community can participate in science and mathematics. Without it, they can't. You ever think about that? Yeah, we left out a massive percentage of humanity from the internet. We keep trying to do it. Pizza Hut got sued and lost because it was completely impossible for blind people to use their website. And so I don't really like IPVS that much, but so because it requires extra technology, and we haven't discussed that one either. So there really doesn't need to be a system, is what I'm trying to tell you. The system is this: I have a file, I'm naming it readme.md, and I'm writing content in it. And then I have another file, and I'm writing content in that. And then I'm going to bring those together. There's two other types: structured data, which is CSVs or YAML or JSON, which are, unfortunately, they are complicated to people that don't understand structured data, but they are still the simplest way to express data, right? CSV, tab delimited, YAML, JSON, those are data nodes. And there is no indication in the specification for KEG as to what the data node should be and what the official name is, the schema, what it should be. That is up to the internet to invent. So whatever structures you want, if you want to create schemas for your particular type of data nodes, that's fine. I am not, the idea here is ultimate simplicity and getting out of the way and just creating a common way to capture the knowledge so that we can then share it in a reliable way. And that includes on USB thumb drives. This entire system is completely protocol agnostic. In other words, it doesn't matter how you get the information. You could put it on a USB stick, go to your buddies and copy it from USB stick and then put it into your collection. And now you have, synchronized their collection. And now the internet becomes a peer-to-peer network instead of what it is now. What it is now is a massive unauthenticated clusterfuck. Because, there's no way to even know that the knowledge you're getting on the internet is from the people who say who they say they are. Because the web decided to discard all of the amazing work of the cypherpunks and others who created technologies, over-engineered technologies, but technologies that allowed things to be authenticated or signed or encrypted. And yes, that requires technology, unfortunately. You don't technically need to do that. You could make a USB stick and just make sure you met that person and said, okay, I'm going to copy it from you because I know who you are. You can manage your own security without overcomplicating this entire system with encryption. But if you want to add encryption, you just take your KEG, which is, again, a KEG is just a whole bunch of nodes in there, text nodes, data nodes, and figure nodes that refer to one another. And they are all put in here. There's a manifest, which is just a big old list that has all the nodes in there and when they were last changed to the second. The most recent changes go to the top of the list so that you can just look at your KEG nodes list and know which things have changed. And some sort of YAML data to represent information about this KEG, that without any structure, you can put whatever you want in there. And then if you want to encrypt it, so if you want to use this, if you're a hacker and you know what you're doing, you can encrypt it. You can encrypt your .keg file. It's just a tarball that's been encrypted using OpenSSL or OpenGPG. It doesn't matter. You can encrypt it however you want, right? It doesn't matter. And you don't even need to encrypt it. You could put it, again, as long as you're safe, as long as you know how to get the content to the other person. Maybe you are being, blocked by the great firewall of China or something, and you want to exchange knowledge. Well, you take your collection, put it on a USB stick, because this is all text and images and stuff. This is not a big deal. You can put I mean, for $8, you can buy 36 gigabytes, or is it 32? 32 gigabytes of storage on a USB stick. And the amount, hey, hi, Purple Elf. I'm just finished up a YouTube video here, so I'm just going to keep talking through the RAID. I apologize for that, but let me go ahead and finish up here, and then I'll talk to you. So at the moment that we have, I really appreciate your RAID, but I'm in the middle of a YouTube video. I could probably pause it, but let me just finish this thought. So what KEG does is you take that collection of data and text and figures, and which can be used to generate books and websites and PDFs and EPUBs and whatever you want. And then you can also add it to a collection, and then you can put a follow list and an avoid list. Avoid is people that you want to blacklist out there that you know where they are, and you refer to them by URI, which is unfortunately the most technical part of this, but the whole world has already been trained in what a URI is. There's one right here, right? So we already know what those are, whether they're using HTTP. And by the way, there's no reason that the protocol has to be HTTP. In fact, the knowledge exchange graph, or the network, the KEG network, is anything. It can be, in fact, probably one of the most common ways to share data across this is going to be mirroring with things like SSH or rsync, or just FTP. Any way you can copy stuff, right? That is literally the only way. And the difference between this and the web is that each individual can have their own collection, or Git. You can use Git if you want. There's any number of ways to do it. That's the thing, is it doesn't dictate what you have to do. It's more about the format, and then you come up with the ways to share that. Now, it does say, however, in a collection that this is my collection, and you can sign the collect YAML file to prove that it's your collection. And then you can put a list of other KEGs that you want to follow on here. And those things, can be triggered. Again, the tooling to get the simplest way for you to go get somebody else's collection is to go get a USB stick from them and drag and drop it into your collection, and then add a link to the follow line. That's it. You don't need any technology there at all. That's tech. That's the simplest amount of technology. And everything now, obviously, there's lots of other ways to do this, and there's going to be engineers that are going to make tooling that are going to make that easier, but that's not required. And that's what I'm trying to say. It's just like you can have a party with a bunch of your hacker buddies, and you can have a bunch of really great write-ups about how to do these really great hacks or something. I'm using one example, and you can have a party. You can say, okay, we used to do this with GPG. With GPG, we have GPG key signing, right? And so then we would look. I love. I didn't hate on modern JS and browsers. I really think that that's a misinterpretation of what I said. I said, I believe, and you can go back and watch the video, I said that the application web is prolific and good, and it needs to happen, but it should not happen at the expense of the document web. That's my point. I wouldn't call that hating on modern JS as much as so yeah, I know, but people do, and I don't want to be grouped into that group. Do I get annoyed by React and JavaScript and sites that won't show in my web browser because they require JavaScript to read the documentation of their blog? Hell yeah. Drives me crazy. So crazy, I made a shit list just for the people who do that. Gopher would be probably the closest, or Gemini. Those are the closest things to it. The problem with Gopher and Gemini are that they are still fundamentally dependent on a network. And I don't want to do that. I seriously, the way that I want to envision the minimum possible technology required is a bunch of people who have a copy of all of their collections, right? And they go to a KEG party at the pub. See where this is going? And they exchange collections. And so they go get somebody's collection and say, hey, I would really love to add you. And then they literally drag and drop their USB. Now, obviously, it would be a great way to get infected because of USB stick infections and stuff like that. So you have to trust the people that are there. But if you brought, what you could do is you could have everybody upload their stuff to a thing. Or the point is, if you're a terminal creep, yeah, you could do an MV, you could do whatever. But the point is that you just take that directory and you drag it on your Mac over, I know, USB firmware. I mean, there's a million things, unfortunately, that are a real part of this. But what's safer, right? You know, I mean, look, you can protect yourself from USB firmware, right? You can create USB condoms. You guys, this is an actual thing. This is an actual thing. These days, you want to make sure you have one. By the way, if you're gonna put a USB from some unknown person, they have things called USB condoms, and they guarantee that it's just going to be a USB thing, and they will trap any. There's so many hacker devices now they have USB charging cables now that are 100% malware built into the cable. So you just have to be really careful. But the point is assuming that the hardware is safe. You're just doing a file exchange. You're just doing a file exchange, and that's the whole point of this is that is from the data exchange. Yeah, and if you know how to safely exchange data, whether it be through a USB stick or it be over the internet, and another way to do that, by the way, and this would require a little bit of a helper application, but all you need to do is it's the least amount of technology necessary. You could take that directory and make a tarball out of it or zip it up and send it over the internet. There's no executable in there. You can just send it over the internet. And if you send it over the internet using something like Proton Mail, it's apt to an encrypted person. It's guaranteed to make it to you fine. And even if you want to go the next level, you can use a tool. Now, this is where we have to depend on tools, unfortunately. But you could use a trusted open source tool for which you can compile the own source code if you really want to. And you can take that tarball and you could create a KEG out of it, a secured KEG or an armored KEG. And that would just use OpenSSL to encrypt the data, the file, and you have a private key that you would have to share, or a public key or something like that. And then you can use GPG for this. I'm just using this as an example because this is really not a part of the specification. This is something that can be done, but it's not required. Again, the main point of KEG is just how do we organize the data, and very, very simple things. So these also have generators, which is an optional thing. Generators are probably the coolest thing for those besides the regular writers out there who are just going to be writing and dealing with static content. One of the biggest problems in the world of static content generation today is the use of static site generation like Hugo. Now, Hugo is wonderful. I love it. But it also is very block-centric and very specific. You have to do what it says. Whereas if we embrace a more generalized idea about content knowledge management and retrieval, we can add a more specific generator to each of the nodes. And so then you could have a dynamic node, I call it. A dynamic node has a generator, which is just a readable script of any kind. It starts with gen dot whatever, and that actually travels along with the node itself. So that if you actually share a node with somebody else, you could see the node and you could see how the node content was generated. The generator is not intended for you to run. It's intended for you to know where the dynamic node got its content from. So, for example, if you wanted to incorporate dynamic content, such as the daily stocks or any number of other things, rather than going and getting the freshest and latest off some API, you could have a KEG site, a KEG that has nodes in it that regularly update their cache. And they would take, that stuff and it would store it as static content, which could then be shared any number of ways. And you also then have a backup of it, right? So you also have this kind of stateful backup for any kind of dynamic content. And this, by the way, this is if you know anything, I'm speaking more to the technical people here, but if you know anything about server-side caching and generation and all this stuff, that's exactly what it is. It's just it puts the control in the hands of the content creators and the people consuming the content. So that because now if you want one node that's a dynamically generated text node, you can have you can regularly go out and get, and there's nothing that says you can't just go out to the API, cut and paste the JSON and plop it into a file. That's again least possible technology. That's the minimum amount of technology. But obviously, you could write a relatively simple gen.sh script that just curls down the latest JSON file, and if you wanted to make a dynamically generated data node, and that data node could be dynamically generated, and then those things can all be combined into artifacts through external tooling. And that is a place where you're going to need to depend on engineers for that. So if you want to use a Pandoc to make a book out of it, you can. But the content itself is completely managed like software. It's managed like knowledge source. You can put the content inside of a Git repo if you want. It doesn't have to be. It could be just on a website. You can share it in any way that you want. And the people that are going to have fun with all their tooling can have fun with their tooling without impacting the ability and the simplicity of the content, and to be able to share it in a way that will survive the test of time. Obsidian is a perfect example of something that sucks. It's proprietary, that will not survive the test of time, that uses technologies, dependencies that are unnecessary. And really what you want is you want a dependency on the least amount of technology, so that whether you're building your own, I mean, we're talking about all of your knowledge. So if you're going to make, and use Electron, please don't get me started. So look, I'm not going to attack a specific tool. The point I'm trying to make here is that if you make a standard that is simple enough and robust enough, then it will withstand the test of time and all the technologies that are added on outside of it. One of the greatest advantages of this is if you follow this method of knowledge management, the simplest thing you could do, right? You could all do it right now. Right now, you could go and just start writing stuff on GitHub. In fact, I already started. So like if I was starting to write this book, right? So I was starting to write the book Terminal Velocity. You can go on GitHub for free today, and you don't have to. You can just click on add a file, and you can add a README file in here. And as long as you know the absolutely simplified syntax for Markdown, which is really, it's so funny because nobody teaches Markdown officially in any school I've ever seen, but it's so important that we learn it because it's literally the syntax of knowledge. All documentation uses it, and believe me, there is some crappy Markdown out there. You go ahead, you can open up files like this, you can't even read them. And John Gruber's own words, the source should always be as readable as the rendered content. That is his first thing he says when he made Markdown. And the people who abuse that are insane. They make it completely unreadable. So this is, like I'm saying, you could go to GitHub today and not spend a dime on anything. And you could immediately have all of your stuff in here. And, flat directory structure, optimal blog link, friendly person, casual voice. So I'm just clicking on all these README files. Each one of these is a text content node. And now you can see it. No, that's the biggest one. So we'll talk about that later. But I don't want to get into the details of that right now. But the idea is that each one of these is a knowledge node, right? And it has a title, and the knowledge nodes can be composed together. And I actually designed this on purpose this way, so that this particular knowledge node has what's called I've been calling them an importable list here. So even though these are just links to other things, in order to expand this into a book, this link to this other node over here can just be copied and replaced inline into that spot if you're writing a tool, and boom, you get a single massive Markdown file, which then can be converted into an EPUB or a Kindle or a PDF, and it could go anywhere. It could be a website, whatever you want to do. One of the really cool things about this is, I don't know if you've seen this, but one of the reasons to keep your knowledge in GitHub instead of Obsidian is because when you go to GitHub, I want you to see this here. So, and by the way, thank you for all the sponsors. Got quite a few there these days on GitHub. But this here says, and okay, so GitHub, as most people know, is a way to store, and it is a service, and it's using all of the things that, applications of JavaScript, those all the right reasons. But by keeping your content simple and free and managing your knowledge as source code, Every time you make a change, that version gets saved on GitHub for free. And also, your stuff is anything that you actually have saved here gets saved automatically into the Arctic Code Vault. Think about that for a second. So just by participating in this method of storing your knowledge content on GitHub, your knowledge base, the writing from your notes, whether they be notes or they be books or they be, just any form of knowledge base, is now saved for eternity in the Arctic. I guarantee you that that's not happening on Reddit or Medium or any other Stack Exchange or any of these other things out there. I just want to sell this point. So by managing your knowledge in the simplest possible form, which is text and very simple images when needed, which we manage as figures, we have to be careful not to abuse even URLs and things, because the criteria is, can it be printed? And URLs cannot be printed. The URL can be printed. Pagan eventually will do something on Pagan, yeah. But Pagan is going to get its own book. Yeah, it's going to take a while though. Pagan, I actually created parsing expression grammar notation to create tools for KEG, because I wanted to write my own simplified version of Markdown and be able to parse it reliably. And so that's why Pagan was created. If you're an academic, I really want to say this. If you're an academic and you want to do book publishing, you can still use LaTeX and Matjax and create content that can generate full-blown textbooks if you want to. And so that's it. So and that's what KEG is. So this is a very long question, but that's what KEG is. KEG is the knowledge exchange is a knowledge exchange graph, and the KEG network is a way to exchange. I've actually registered keg.sh and keg.pub, which will be places for us to seed KEG. One of the really great things about KEG is it takes all of the lessons learned from other really great software projects, such as Discovery. And so we don't actually have to, if we put it on the internet, we can piggyback over the internet, right? In fact, I do plan on making a Chrome extension that will detect whether a website is actually not a website at all. It's actually a KEG node, or a KEG, as they say. I've called it a KEG node, KEG site, and KEG directory, but these days I just call it a KEG. So we can actually detect whether a website is actually a KEG. And let me give you an idea of this. So I already started this. This is back when I had a different format. So this is the website, right? This is the rendered website for Markdown that I wrote some time ago. And I don't know that I'm going to have them be in the same directory, but if you follow this simplified, model, you can actually, in 10 lines of bash, and there's a video of me writing this, in 10 lines of bash with pandoc, you can write a website generator from any KEG. So all I have to do here is change the index.readme to readme, which is readme.md is the index.html of KEG. And I didn't decide that. GitHub did. They decided that readme.md was the standard. That's why whenever you go to anything on the web over here, you see readme.md files, because those are the ones they automatically pick up to show you. So this has been influenced by that. But yeah, if you go to the readme file, here is the entire web page as a Markdown file. Jekyll stuff failed pretty heavily for reasons. It was a great move in the right direction, but one of the reasons that it failed is because of this front matter, which this is a really old version of KEG Mark, I'm calling it, back when I was still influenced by this. In fact, I was a pretty significant participant in the TOML specification for a while, made the logo actually, because I wanted to rethink structured data in general and how it could be shared most easily. At one point I created a thing called a file system as a database, which is basically just a bunch of data nodes as a database. And you can still do that. You could actually use this data node structure and create a sort of a JSON pathway through the data and have it never leave a disk. You can totally do that. In fact, you can build an entire database with nothing but FLAC files if you want to, using this method. And you can create tools, which I look forward to making, where, probably the tool will probably be KEG or ZKEG. And then you could say, I want to get the path, and the path will navigate through the top level nodes, whatever you decide to name them, and then it will be dot whatever, and then that'll go through the YAML data or JSON data or CSV data. And so you can create data paths. It's funny how you see them tonight. And oh, that's cool. Yeah, and you'll be able to navigate through the data and use this as a database. So I actually combined the efforts that in 2015, people will remember. I personally spent a lot on Hugo at the time because I was hoping to have all of those things fill the need, and they really didn't. And I made something called the FADBA, which was file system as a database. And it was this exact same idea. It was the idea that you would have structured data inside of a directory, and then the directories themselves would serve as separation between tables or, however, object-based data models and stuff like that. But it turned out really easy. It was really easy to mix this, and there's really just the three types of data nodes, or three types of nodes for all knowledge, all printable knowledge, and that's text, data, structured data, and figures. And figures being SVGs, raster, and all that kind of thing. And if you look at any book that's been written anytime recently, this is usually how they exchange the data. Now, words are king here, but the other stuff is still doable. And if you do this right, honestly, you can share a KEG that's mostly data, and you can allow that to be used as a database. So you can even do it remotely, which is starting to blow my mind because they've tried to do this so many times. But it's once you have a collection here, having a tool. So the real magic in the secret sauce here is that you're dealing with local files. There's no internet. However your collection comes to be, each one of these caches is a full KEG. Now you can follow people, and eventually you'll probably make it so that you can follow people without following their whole entire KEG, because some KEGs are going to be bigger than others. But you can make it so that you have a partial KEG. But even so, even if you have a whole KEG, I mean, we're talking nothing. And most people do not really care to follow that many people who are producing written content. So even with 1,000 people, we were doing the math the other day, you're still going to be able to fit like 1,000 people's KEG collections, individual KEGs, because there's not a lot of content producers out there, into your own collection. The thing that's really great about that, this is different than anything that's happening on the web right now, is that you carry your collection with you. Your collection doesn't live on some server somewhere. If you want your server, if you want to create a server for your collection, or you want to go to keg.pub and you want to publish your collections there so that it's easier for people to copy collections and stuff like that, you're certainly welcome to do that. That's up to the industry to decide, but it's not required. And the thing that's really great about that is that the KEG collection has everything you need to search it. And because of the format is semantic and simplified, you can write your own search engine optimizations for your own searches. That means you have control of the searches. There's no Google engine anymore. There's no engine at all. There's nothing required. The people that are going to be writing engines are going to be writing utilities that run on your computer or on your phone. Yes, it's possible that you could have a KEG collection on your phone, an entire collection on your phone, and you could just search your own collection through natural voice, voice interactions for Google or whatever, because all that's built into the mobile apps. Or you can have your phone actually dial up into another centralized app, like on keg.pub or anywhere else that you feel comfortable putting it. The point is that you could do it with Flare Project tool. So it's the simplicity and the content ownership. And the other thing too is it leverages all of the lessons learned from Git about redundancy. Every single person who follows you has a copy of your entire KEG. I want you to pause and think about that for a second. Now we have, and by the way, it's authenticated. So if you want to sign it, then any of those people can prove you can prove that it's actually them. And if you want to encrypt it, you can do the same thing and not even allow them to decrypt the cache. But if you do allow it, these people curated a collection of zettelkasten. Zettelkasten has influenced it a lot. But the difference between a zettelkasten and a KEG is a zettelkasten is a form of a KEG, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And let me give you an example of that. So this book that I've been writing is not a zettelkasten. So my zettelkasten is a KEG, right? It's a KEG. It's got unique identifiers. They're all small. It's used almost all entirely text nodes. There's some figures in there, but the book that I'm writing is also a KEG. It's not a zettelkasten at all. It might seem like a zettelkasten on occasion because there's nothing limiting the size of any of the specific things. And the first thing I want you to see here is it is a flattened directory structure, but it uses slugs for uniqueness. So, and then the slugs can pull in other slugs. And of course, we always print out URLs. Links are illegal. There's two things that can blow people away, but there's two things in KEGMARK that are illegal. It's illegal to use an image tag in KEG, and it's illegal to use a link of any kind other than to a local KEG resource. And there's people going to complain about that, but I promise you it's not as bad as you think. If you really pause for a second, you'll notice that one of the major problems with the world and the World Wide Web is intersite linking. You can trace a number of evils to intersite linking to the wrong thing, man-in-the-middle attacks, linking to executable files, query string craziness, cookies. I mean, there's a million things that are wrong with linking. And not to mention the fact that any website that does any of that linking is completely lost if that code, if that knowledge is ever meant to be printed. And this is why there's like very strict rules in the publishing world about how to capture a URL as a reference. Now, I think they're overly pedantic, but it doesn't matter. The rule number one is thou shalt always print out the full, URL whenever it's included in any of your knowledge content, because that link, you need to be able to know what you're going to. And in this case, these are automatically highlighted for me because GitHub does that, but you don't want to do that. How to handle personal info for an AI assistant, probably both private and encrypted versions. Yeah, I think you could. And it's really, the first version of Zet that I made, I had multiple KEGs, right? So it's the thing of it is that there's going to be people that are going to have different flavors of KEGs. People are going to have a KEG that's got all their malware in it and write-ups on that. There's going to be people, by the way, there's some things that don't belong in a KEG, right? So a machine learning model has no business being in a KEG, because it's too big, it's too bulky, it can't be printed. If it can't be printed, it doesn't belong in a KEG. It really doesn't. If it can't be printed, it doesn't belong there. There are lots of other wonderful places to put it, but they are not in a KEG, because it'll break. It'll break the whole KEG network if we have really massive, large files in there that are, we have these the most complicated thing that we should probably ever see would be a very complicated SVG or a really, really, really big raster, image of some kind. And even in those cases, we don't going to get crazy here. In fact, when I first did, it was first called the Essential Web. That's what I first, in 2016, when we invented this some time ago with my people at SkillStack, and we started doing all of this, we actually put limitations on the size of images and type and made them raster images, because it's not about the images. If you think about a publication, very rarely is the publication about the images, particularly academic publications. And if you do have something relatively complicated to display, that's where, things like LaTeX have always been there for those publishers. And that's not for the common person, but it does allow this method of knowledge, management and storage and exchange to cross, the entire span of society that wants to produce written content, knowledge workers, writers, bloggers, and everybody in between. I think that's pretty much it for my pitch. So the relation to a zettelkasten, yes, it does look like a zettelkasten because they're relatively short. And I think people will find that it is more valuable to keep one idea very succinct and try hard to keep only one title. In my zettelkasten, I have a very strict requirement that So this is a figure, by the way. This is a zettelkasten figure. In the zettelkasten, I have a very strict requirement um, to not have anything but a title, and there's no subheadings or anything, right? There's just a title, and then there's an idea. There's a title, and then there's an idea. Because this is, so it's important that we say this before we finish. So the idea of zettelkasten from Niklas Luhmann, if you want to read about it, is based on this idea of paper cards. And I don't want to get dragged into this, but is it Luhmann? You guys find it? Luhmann. Where is it? Luhmann. Is it Luhmann or is it WW? I can't remember where it is. Zettelkasten. It's in my Zet. I can go look it up. That's not. Do not read this document. This introduction to Zettelkasten method is totally wrong. It's totally wrong. It's not totally wrong. It's mostly wrong on the important points that matter. That promise me, if you're going to do the zettelkasten thing, that you'll read the words of Niklas Luhmann himself first, which are obviously really hard to find. Zet edit Luhmann. So I have a zettelkasten. There we go. So it's luhmann.surge. That's what I was looking for. And that's what a zettelkasten is for, is to be able to pull it up like that, like I just did. This is the actual writing. Whoops. This is the actual writing of Niklas Luhmann. And I think you'll notice for yourself the discrepancies between what he wrote and what all of the people who have interpreted his stuff in a modern era and ruined it with unnecessary technology have done. And so the original idea was you had a card, and you would put thoughts on that card, and you would file it away in a way that was retrievable. And so that is what this is. And the point I'm trying to make is that a KEG, while a zettelkasten is a KEG is not necessarily a zettelkasten. And I had to sit on this for a full year after I started using the Zet method before I realized that the two were not the same. So, and the reason this is coming up recently within the last week is because I want to write a book. And the zettelkasten has been phenomenal at capturing all of my spontaneous independent thoughts and notes and everything. That's what it's for. But ultimately, the zettelkasten is there, like it was for Luhmann, to help produce. But the guy wrote like 40-something books from his zettelkasten method. It's the most powerful method of all for managing your knowledge. And by the way, don't use Obsidian or something that's going to lock you into a particular application or technology. You can practice the zettelkasten method with nothing but GitHub and a little bit of, constraints as to how you organize things. And that's what this is. So after a year of using the KEG, of using my own zettelkasten, I now need to write some books and stuff. And I realized that all of my writing and coding for the Zet tool that I have has informed and really validated the decisions I made early on about how to organize knowledge into these nodes, because these nodes lend themselves very well and easily to a zettelkasten method, but they're not restricted to it. I mean, I can have a text node that has, 25, 30 different sections in it. Now I won't do that, because as Scrivener and many other, tools have shown you, it's always better to write sectionally, because you usually want to have one best idea, and then I can reorganize those ideas by aggregating them together using something I call a bulleted link list, bulleted import list, which is what this is. It's a big fancy word for something that just says, so this is a bulleted list, right? So this works completely fine. All this is a very simple markdown that links to these other, one idea kind of things. They may have multiple headers. Unlike a zettelkasten, I have a very strict thing that says only one header, one title. The zettelkasten idea says force yourself to keep it on a single card. It's one of the biggest things that's forgotten from all the technical things. Luhmann makes a big deal about limiting. By the way, it was 1/2 of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. That was the size of his original slips. A zettel means slip. It doesn't mean card. It means a slip of paper, and he used paper. He even recommended you use paper. All this stuff is lost on everybody else who writes and talks about this because they didn't read it. They didn't read what he had to say. They just interpreted what they thought he was thinking. So he said slip of paper because you could fit more of them in his boxes and stuff. And he had to figure out a way to retrieve them quickly with a unique naming system. But his system was always something he could remember and write down. And then he would create these indexes out of these things that were also slips that had written down the association with the other things. And a lot of that stuff has kind of gone away because of our ability to search so quickly. I can go into my zettelkasten and I can go on GitHub and I can find any note on anything I've ever kept. And I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to pay a dime. I didn't have to install an application. All I had to do was follow a particular style of organization, which meant giving all my little thoughts, my little slips, a unique identifier, which, that I do have code for. But you can do it from a clock in your watch. And then just, following this kind of idea. And then I would occasionally link between them, which he does do, but he warns you about. Because when you do that, you kind of make these dependencies even between your own stuff. And sometimes those things, you should be free to change the content of it settle at any time. So if you want to study the zettelkasten method, please study it. But after a year of using the zettelkasten method and loving it, oh my God, it's like having they call it a second brain. And it really is, because my brain is going bad and I'm forgetting things like crazy. And if it weren't for my zettel, like I just proved by looking up the Lumen link, I can go there and find anything, anytime. And I don't have to pay anything extra. So it's a method. And then by adding something like these importable lists here, this is just a list of other, nodes, tiny little nodes. But the tool that I'm writing, and this is why I did this, the tool that I'm writing and that Escapos and other people are helping me with is going to replace these with the content of this and then give it a title and indent it. So by doing this, you can very easily create aggregation tools that produce full books or full blogs or full websites. Now, in this particular case, because of the organization of the content, the way I've done it, these things can become web pages as is. Because the link here, the link, by the way, is not directly to a file. You never, ever, ever, ever link to a file on the web. You link to a route, and then that route will show you whatever the default is. And in this case, it's pulling up the readme.md file. But if I put this exact same content, rendered it as an HTML page, and put it up on my website, which will all happen dynamically, then I could click on the link and would go to the same exact place because of the requirement in the specification to have a flattened directory structure with root relative links or rooted local links to the other nodes in all cases. And that allows it to work on both GitHub or on the web. And if you want to, all you have to do at that point is if you're okay with polluting your KEG with a bunch of HTML files as well inside of there, you can actually generate an entire portable website that's browsable from a local file browser instead of necessarily even having a web server. So so that's another reason. I mean, you could just read the markdown and stuff, but if you go ahead and render it, you can pull that out. I'm getting a call, so I'm going to have to end now, but that's the end of my what is KEG?